In this lecture segment, we turn to the art of the Northern Netherlands, the Dutch Republic. We'll focus on two works by Rembrandt, as well as examples of the new genres of art invented to appeal to a middle-class market. The Low Countries splits into two portions. The southern portion, Flanders or Belgium, stays under the control of Spain and remains Catholic. The northern portion achieves their independence from Spain officially with the signing of a treaty in 1648, but had been functioning as a separate Calvinist country for decades by that point. This country is the Dutch Republic, what we call the Netherlands today. The Dutch Republic has a representative form of government and has a national legislature with representatives from each province and a head of state called a stadhouder. In the Dutch Republic, Calvinism is the official religion, but only about 50% of the population are Calvinist. All religions, except for Catholicism, are tolerated. The two enemies of the Dutch are Spain and Catholicism, and they, for the most part, do not tolerate either. Folks can worship how they want and live their lives as they choose, as long as their activities do not interfere with commerce. The Dutch form an international trading empire with the Dutch West and East India companies, sending commercial fleets of ships around the world to bring back spices, fabrics, and other goods to fuel a prosperous period for the nation. They have a massive middle class and social institutions to help care for the sick, the old, and the orphaned. The benefits of trade and international commerce are felt on all levels of society, and everyone is elevated by their economic activities. As a result, we have a middle class with enough disposable income to buy art and lots of it. We've seen the seeds of these trends in the Northern Renaissance, prints tacked up on the walls of homes, works of art for merchants' houses, and works of art made for an open market, not for specific patrons. While some works of art will be commissioned, most were made for this huge open market. The tastes of the middle class dictate the art of the Dutch Republic. We see this in the development of new independent genres of art. In the Marota altarpiece, we talked about the small scale of the work and its purpose for personal devotion in the home. We talked about its taking a sacred scene and putting it in a domestic context. We see the seeds of many new 17th century genres of art in what was made in the Northern Renaissance. Genres including still life, the depiction of non-living things, cityscape, the views of cities, genre, scenes of everyday life, often set in homes and especially women in interiors, and landscape, views of the outdoors, that we see hints of here and here. We also see the continuation and popularization of portraiture. Except for portraiture, these works of art will be made for small Dutch homes, not churches, and were all sold on an open market. While there will be portraits and some commissions, the bulk of what was made were works of art for the middle class, folks who wanted works of art for their homes, including paintings and prints. In contrast to Rubens, Dutch artists will not have big workshops. Many will have other jobs in addition to painting, as innkeepers or brewers, for example. We will not see big religious works like Rubens painted. Calvinist churches are whitewashed, and images do not have a role in religious worship, so no saints, no depictions of the Virgin Mary. We will see narrative scenes in print and paint, stories from the Bible and small-scale works of art for the home. We'll also see the rise of a brand new genre, the church interior, showing us views of whitewashed Catholic churches converted for Protestant worship, filled with guild symbols and local identity, but no images of saints. The diversity of art production in this period makes it a challenging area to teach in just a few minutes. We'll talk about a couple works as representative examples of the art of the Dutch Republic. One of the fascinating issues in Dutch art is meaning. In Italy, we often have information about a patron and a commission. We may know where the work of art was displayed, giving us clues about what the meaning of the work of art was for its original audience. In the Dutch Republic, because it's mostly an open market, we don't have specifics about works of art in the same way. We may not have any idea who owned a work of art or where it was shown. So there's a multiplicity of meaning to Dutch works and lots of varying interpretations of the works of art we'll talk about. One of the works of art that helps us see the vastly different context of art making in the Dutch Republic is a church interior. This example depicts a church in Delft, a Dutch city, that had a special significance for Dutch viewers. This artist created this and other images of this church as part of a special cluster of images that were made and sold at mid-century, a popular pool of imagery, like the flurry of superhero movies that have come out within the past few years. In 1648, the Dutch signed a treaty with Spain that made their new country official and brought about a rise in patriotism and pride in the new nation. As Dutch artists were selling on an open market to make any money, they had to make art people wanted to buy. So Dutch art is really responsive to the shifts in tastes and preferences of the Dutch public. This is a depiction of an actual church and an actual tomb in that church. It's an example of the Dutch interest in making works of art taken from life, or naar het leven. So why did they want a depiction of the interior of this church? Here's the church on the town square in Delft, and the interior of the church looking towards the apse end. This church used to have an altarpiece before the conversion of the church from being Catholic to being Protestant, and the most sacred part of the church is not filled with an altarpiece, but with a tomb that you see here for the leader of the Dutch revolt, William the Silent, who was assassinated and was called the Father of the Fatherland. It was a tourist site. People visited the church to pay their respects to William the Silent, similar to folks going to Graceland today to pay homage to Elvis Presley. Compare the view of the new church in Delft with Bernini's Cornaro Chapel. Such a contrast. Instead of being a grand space to glorify the church and help the viewer have a spiritual experience, we see a community space with a wealth of everyday detail, filled with the normal, an actual space with regular people paying their respects to the architect of their independence from Spain. The artist even signed his name in graffiti on a pier. A genre of art showing the interior of a church is a unique development in European art, and the Dutch likely wanted images like this to express their pride as a new nation. Families even staged their family portraits in front of the tomb of William the Silent, perhaps the rough equivalent of a family selfie today at the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, celebrating a nation and a family's identity connected to national identity. We also see pride of place in Dutch landscapes. This Dutch landscape shows us the big skies and low horizon lines that are part of living below sea level. We see another specific identifiable Dutch city, Haarlem, with the major church and the major industry, linen production, with the linen stretched out here in the sun to be bleached white. And this work of art, as is typical for Dutch art, is flexible in meaning. A religious viewer could see it as the souls being purified through Christ, through the light of the sun. And for a different viewer, they might express pride of place, like having a Jayhawk bumper sticker or lawn ornament. A person could hang this on their walls as expressive of their hometown. Dutch artists painted countless images of women busy at tasks in both prints and paintings. Scholars today debate the meaning of these genre scenes. Dutch scholars tend to think that these were didactic, that they were teaching lessons about the proper roles of women. American scholars tend to think that they were not moralizing or intended to teach a moral, but instead they were works of art made for women to enjoy in their homes, validating their activities, celebrating them for building the family and the nation, beautiful images of the home for the people who lived there. We often see, like we do here, women in ordered, beautiful, well-appointed interiors caring for children, sweeping, doing handwork, loads of everyday detail, beautiful textures, all set within an affirming context, likely intended for a female audience. These images of the everyday are still highly constructed. These are not photographs or literal depictions of specific homes. These are crafted images. Homes like this did not have black and white flooring in main living spaces. These images were created to present a certain view of life, like heavily selective Instagram posts, showing the beautiful, the pristine, the ordered. And we see similar depictions in print, including this series by female artist Gertrude Rochman, who did not just work as a printmaker in her family's business, but also knew how to do all of these domestic tasks, creating and selling images that showed the everyday tasks of women that were worthy of being shown in art. Compare this to the Council of Trent's rejection of everyday secular subject matter. The Dutch embrace the everyday. You can go and see this print at KU's Spencer Museum of Art. Rembrandt van Rijn is a Dutch artist who consciously places himself and his work within the context of art history in Europe, even though he never left the Dutch Republic. Prints were such an effective and common form of communication, and there was so much international commerce that he was well versed in art history and what was happening artistically in Europe. He's the son of a miller but wants to be an artist and is apprenticed to a local master. He's successful as a portraitist early in his career and establishes a workshop where he trained many students, which was unusual in the Dutch Republic. He begins his career by experimenting with his self-portrait. Rubens made about 4 self-portraits. Rembrandt makes at least 40 painted self-portraits, in addition to a few dozen prints. His interest in the self-portrait follows in the footsteps of Dürer and the heritage of northern self-portraiture. His portraits show the full arc of his career, from his experimentation as a youth, like you see in this one from when he's around 22 years old. We see the Baroque interest in light and dark. He's even used the wooden end of his brush to depict his curly hair. And here in another early self-portrait, he shows himself making different expressions. But he stuck with the self-portrait throughout his career. We can be pretty sure that if he used his time and materials to make a work of art, he intended for it to have a financial benefit. Folks wanted to buy portraits of Rembrandt, and he was willing to satisfy that demand. This self-portrait from the last few years of his life shows him with the tools of his trade. His palette and brushes and maul stick, which he used to support his hand so he didn't smudge the painting while working. He looks directly at the viewer, as we've seen with Van Eyck, with Dürer, and his countryman Judith Leister. He's wearing a robe lined with fur and a distinctive white cap, composed of just a few broad strokes of white paint. Behind him are 2 circles. Their meaning is uncertain, but they may relate to stories about artists like Giotto, supposedly, who could draw perfect circles without a compass. The circles, the clothing, the forthright expression and connection with the viewer, the display of his tools work together to present a conception of him as an artist, as a professional, perhaps as a genius. And his brushwork further communicates this. This is a super painterly work. We can follow his hand and use our eyeballs to fill in the forms as the color combines to create shapes. It's a tour de force work, showing us what he could do. His brushwork becomes looser over the course of his career, but he continues the trends we saw at the beginning. In his eyebrow here, he again used the stick end of his brush to carve into the paint, helping us to see the raw and real Rembrandt. No idealism, just the painter presenting himself and his creation for the viewer, using paint that declares his artistry. The brush and hand of Rembrandt was here. In contrast to the majority of Dutch artists who picked one of the genres, specializing in landscape or still life, for example, Rembrandt worked in almost all of the genres in print and in paint. Still life, genre, landscape, cityscape, portraits, group portraits, and in each of these genres he sketches from life, direct observation, drawing on site or even scratching etching plates while outdoors. He also contributed to the market for religious imagery. We know images were not part of worship spaces in churches, but they were shown in the home. Rembrandt contributed to this market in print and paint. He uses an intaglio process we have not talked about before, etching. The artist covers a copper plate in a layer of an acid-resistant substance, and then scratches it with an etching needle, and then immerses the plate in acid, letting the acid do the work of carving into the plate. The longer the plate is in the acid, the deeper the lines get. An artist can literally doodle on a plate, scratch and create an image, as we see in his early, teeny self-portraits. You see here one of his surviving copper plates, and an impression of that plate, showing the range of tone he achieved in etching, from deep velvety areas to light and bright areas. You can also see the sketchy quality etching allowed for. His depiction of the crucifixion of Christ in this print may have provided an intimate personal experience for a viewer. The print is about as big as a legal-sized piece of paper. You can imagine holding it or having it on a tablecloth, and looking at the range of characters Rembrandt depicts: soldiers, figures in mourning, and the light-bathed depiction of Christ in the center. Again, that 17th century interest in strong contrast between light and dark. Some illuminated and some in darkness. Perhaps a meditative image intended to help the viewer personally witness this significant scene from the New Testament. This is an etching with areas of velvety texture made by drypoint. Imagine running a knife through a new jar of peanut butter and how the knife makes a trough but also kicks up peanut butter to either side of the blade. Same thing with the copper plate, and Rembrandt carves into the plate and leaves the displaced copper in place to catch more of the ink and to make these rich passages of black texture that you especially see here. A print like this was desirable because of its subject matter and the way it creates a personal experience for the viewer, but also because it was made by Rembrandt, giving this image currency and making it very marketable. Examining Dutch art shows us a whole new dimension for Baroque art. art for homes, new genres of art, works of art for private, intimate use, and they show artists engaging with the world in a really direct way, involving viewers not using the grandiose tactics of Flemish and Italian Baroque, but through the everyday, the familiar, and the present.